So just listen to this, because I've egged it so much that you might fear I've over-egged it, but I don't think I have. I think this is quite brilliant, and it was written in response to our clip, actually, about the weird dislike of Prince Harry and his wife and where it comes from. And a lot of people are unhappy with the observation that her ethnicity is one of the most obvious reasons to distinguish between her and other female members of the royal family. But so the Twitter account is called Royal Suitor, and as with so much online, I don't know what's real and what's not, but the byline on this is RS Lock. Pay attention. This is really important. It's only a 3-minute read, and I'll share it with you now, because I felt pennies dropping as never before when I read this. So we'll start at the top again. I might do my Jack and Ori voice for this. All right, I won't. Imagine a society founded on a class structure with the brackets white, close brackets, and the brackets are important, British royal family at the top as determined by birth and by blood, right? Don't have to imagine it, that's what we've got. It's not a matter of opinion, that's a matter of historical fact. A biracial woman enters the top of the pyramid by marriage, negating both the birth and blood requirements society had previously been told were preconditions. Because she lacks those prerequisites, she's considered unworthy. Because she's proud of her own heritage and regards herself as equal to others at the top of the pyramid, she's considered ungrateful. The town criers called out from the lower tiers of the pyramid, "I've never met her, but I look at her and I don't think I'd like you in real life," said one. "We Brits prefer true royalty to fashion royalty," proclaimed another. These are direct quotes from prominent columnists and commentators. Shouts of "she just doesn't speak our language" came whistling on the wind. But at the top of the pyramid, the cries were met with silence. So she's under attack in some fairly horrible ways, and they expected perhaps to get some support and protection from the boss, or even the brother. Were they too far away from it? Were they too disconcerted to know what to reply? Or did they use the cacophony from below to muffle the echo of their own whispers as they murmured the same things? The loudest gossip monger was impossible to ignore as he oafishly admonished her to go back to America. There was a brooch, I think, worn by one of the royals at an early meeting with the Duchess of Sussex, which I should double check the facts before I describe it. But have a look yourself. After years of being told that she was unworthy and ungrateful, the newlywed took the crier's advice and returned from whence she came. Despite one tattler's audacious cautions not to force her husband to, and she quotes again, "choose between you and us," he did in fact choose his wife, just as he did the day he married her, much to their chagrin. Ironically, though society spurned her placement at the top of the pyramid, when she leaves with her husband, for some, it calls into question whether the pyramid's peak is still something to aspire to. God, this is good. Whether those at the top are truly elite. Whether blood and birth really are prerequisites. Their departure is considered a rejection of the pyramid as a construct, thus a rejection of the society itself. For others, it was a necessary repudiation and confirmed that just as they suspected, she was NOCD, which translates as not our class, dear. And remember, the Duchess of Cambridge took an awful lot of jip for A, not being an aristocrat, and B, having a mother who had once worked as an air hostess, but she towed the line and fitted in. Final paragraph. Still, that wasn't enough. For society to maintain order, she must be reclassified and her elite status conferred by marriage removed. But the society is trapped in a conundrum. Her husband and their children are at the top of the pyramid by birth and by blood. Now, I'd remind you, this was written before today's announcements about patronages and honorary military appointments being removed from the Duke and Duchess. Her husband and their children are at the top of the pyramid by birth and by blood. Removing titles, military honours, and patronages won't remove her from the top of the pyramid. The only thing that will reclassify her is to remove her from her husband. And the society has been working diligently, though unsuccessfully, to that end since the day they learned that Harry and Meghan were a couple. Do you know, I don't even know the real identity of the person that wrote that, but it seems to me to be the most insightful, informed and plausible explanation of matters royal that I have ever read in my life. And while you won't be surprised to learn that I don't have a spare room full of royal biographies or royal histories, I do read the papers every day, and I try, for obvious reasons, to read stuff that I don't like and papers that I don't agree with. And I have never read anything even half as good as that. Partly because it makes absolutely perfect sense. Partly because it retrospectively explains so many things that I have been baffled and confused by. Indeed, it was inspired, that little piece, by the phone-in we did on Monday, asking what on earth is it that she's supposed to have done wrong? And partly because it's so prescient. Remember, this was written on Monday. Today is Friday. I don't think that qualifies as a scoop either while we're here. But that was written on Monday. Today is Friday. It has literally just been announced that the Duke and Duchess of Sussex are to lose their honorary military appointments and royal patronages. And this was written 5 days ago. Removing titles, military honours and patronages won't remove her from the top of the pyramid. The only thing that will reclassify her is to remove her from her husband. And the society has been working diligently, though unsuccessfully, to that end since the day they learned that Harry and Meghan were a couple. I think, and obviously my natural immodesty pains me slightly to say this, I think that's among the most powerful words you've ever heard on this programme. It's absolutely brilliant. And I'm not sure that you can argue with a single syllable of it.
Squaddies, I need you to sit down for this one. Because what I'm about to walk you through isn't just another hit piece breakdown, it isn't just another "the Mail did it again" segment. This is, hand on heart, one of the single clearest explanations I have ever come across for why Meghan was treated the way she was the moment she joined the royal family. And it didn't come from a royal biographer. It didn't come from a palace insider. It came from an anonymous Twitter account. It got read out loud on LBC by James O'Brien. And once you hear it, you will never watch royal coverage the same way again. So stick with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to understand something that a huge chunk of the British commentariat still to this day either can't or won't say out loud. If you're new here, welcome. I'm the one YouTube channel that isn't afraid to call out the tabloid machine for what it actually is. And if that sounds like your kind of channel, smash that subscribe button now, because you are going to want to be here for what's coming later this week too. Let's rewind for a second. A few years back, James O'Brien did a segment on LBC asking a pretty simple question. What exactly is Meghan supposed to have done wrong? Not what did the papers say she did. Not what did some royal correspondent claim on a panel show. What did she actually, factually do that justified the sheer volume of vitriol aimed at her from the moment she started dating Prince Harry? He never got a satisfying answer. Nobody ever really has, because there isn't one. But a few days after that segment aired, someone using the handle Royal Suitor writing under the byline RS Lock, posted a short essay online that O'Brien later described as one of the most insightful things he'd ever read on the subject. And when he read it out on air, you could genuinely hear him getting more animated line by line, because it was connecting dots that a lot of people had been dancing around for years. The core of the argument goes something like this. Picture the royal family as sitting at the top of a very old, very rigid social pyramid, one built entirely on bloodline and birth. That's not opinion, that's just how the institution has always worked. Then imagine a mixed-race woman marrying into the very top of that pyramid, skipping the birth and blood entry requirements entirely. According to the piece, that single fact, not anything she said, not anything she did, just the fact of how she got there, was enough to make large parts of that pyramid's ecosystem uncomfortable. He described it as brilliant, and said it was written in response to a clip about the strange dislike of Prince Harry's wife, and where it actually comes from. And here's the part that should stop you in your tracks. That essay was written and posted before the palace stripped Harry and Meghan of their military patronages. Days before. Which means whoever wrote it had essentially predicted, with eerie accuracy, what was about to happen, because they understood the mechanics of the institution better than most professional commentators seem to. Strip away the poetic language for a second, and here's what the essay is really saying, in plain terms. Meghan was never going to be accepted on the terms everyone pretended mattered. Being gracious, being hard-working, fitting in. Those were never the actual test. The real unspoken test was always going to be about lineage and background, and no amount of good behaviour was ever going to satisfy a test she was never eligible to pass in the first place. Think about how many times you heard the phrase, "She doesn't act like a royal." Think about the columnists who said out loud on the record that they'd taken one look at her and decided they simply didn't like her, before she said a single public word. Think about the endless compare and contrast pieces holding her up next to Kate, always finding some tiny, invented distinction to hammer on. None of that was really about her personality. It was about the fact that she didn't fit the traditional mould. And instead of the institution stepping in to correct that narrative, there was, and this is the bit that stings the most, silence. Nobody at the top pushed back. Nobody stood up publicly and said, "Enough." And then, when it all became unbearable and Harry and Meghan made the extraordinary decision to step back and leave the country, the reaction told you everything you needed to know. Suddenly, the same critics who spent years insisting she didn't belong were furious that she was choosing to leave. You can't have it both ways. You can't spend years telling someone they're not wanted and then act shocked when they take you at your word. Here's why I wanted to bring this back up, squaddies, and it's not just because it's a great piece of writing. It's because this exact dynamic, this exact playbook, is still running today. Look at the RAVEC security saga. Look at how every single time Harry so much as sets foot in the UK, there's a fresh cycle of will he, won't he get police protection stories dragged out for maximum drama, as if his safety is a bargaining chip rather than a basic obligation. Look at how differently that's framed compared to how security arrangements for other family members are discussed. The Pyramid essay called this years ago. It said the only way to truly push Meghan out of that top tier was to separate her from Harry entirely, and depriving the family of adequate protection so they're forced to spend less time on British soil is about as close to that as you can get without saying it outright. Look at the panel shows. Every single week there's some new segment. GMB, Jeremy Vine, Channel 5, wheeling out a guest to relitigate the same tired grievances using the same coded language. Difficult, attention-seeking, playing the victim. It's the same pyramid logic dressed up in 2026 clothing. The costume changes. The underlying mechanism doesn't. And that's honestly what makes this essay so timeless. It wasn't really about one specific tabloid headline or one specific TV appearance. It was a diagnosis of the entire system. And once you understand the diagnosis, every single new headline about Harry and Meghan starts to make a horrible kind of sense. I want to sit on one part of this a bit longer because I think it's the part that gets skipped over the most. The silence from the people who could have stopped it. When you're the newest, most scrutinized member of an institution and you're getting hammered in print on a near-daily basis, the people around you, the family, the aides, the machine that's supposed to protect its own, have a choice. They can step in. They can issue a statement. They can simply say, "This has gone too far, leave her alone." And for years, that didn't happen. Whether that was because the institution genuinely didn't see the harm, or because on some level the negative coverage was seen as useful, is a question people are still arguing about. But either way, the silence was deafening, and it told Meghan, and it told all of us watching, exactly where she stood in that hierarchy. Compare that to how quickly statements get issued to protect other members of the family when the narrative turns against them. The contrast alone should tell you everything about whose comfort was actually being prioritized. Now, I already know what's going to happen in the comments. The usual crowd is going to show up and say I'm playing the race card, or that I'm making everything about ethnicity, or some version of why does everything have to be about that? And to those people, I'd just gently ask, if it's not about that, then what exactly is the explanation? Because in years of this circus, nobody critical of Meghan has ever managed to articulate a single concrete provable thing she did that justified the scale of the coverage. Not one. Every explanation eventually collapses into vibes. She seemed fake. She seemed calculated. I just don't like her energy, which, conveniently, are all things that can never actually be disproven and never have to be backed up with evidence. Meanwhile, the pyramid essay offers an explanation that's testable, that's consistent, and that, uncomfortably for a lot of people, keeps predicting exactly what happens next. That's not a coincidence. That's what happens when you correctly identify the actual mechanism instead of getting distracted by the noise on top of it. What I love about this essay, and about O'Brien's reaction to it, is that it comes from outside the usual royal commentary bubble. It's not a royal reporter with access to protect. It's not someone who needs an invitation to the next garden party. It's an outside observer looking at the pattern with completely fresh eyes. And that's often exactly what you need to see, something everyone inside the system has been trained not to say. And genuinely, credit where it's due. O'Brien didn't just read it and move on. He sat with it, he admitted it reframed things he'd been personally confused about for years, and he said flat out that he didn't think you could argue with a single part of it. For someone who built a career pushing back on lazy narratives, that's a pretty significant admission. So here's the real question I want to leave you with, squaddies. How many more years, how many more predicted it before it happened moments does it take before the wider conversation catches up to what this essay laid out in 5 short paragraphs? Because from where I'm sitting, the receipts keep piling up, and the pattern keeps repeating, and at some point manufactured dislike stops being a fringe theory and just becomes the accurate description of what's actually been happening this whole time. If this video connected some dots for you the way it did for me, do me a favor. Hit subscribe, ring that notification bell, and drop a comment telling me which part of this hit hardest for you. This channel exists because of this community, and every single one of you sharing these videos is what keeps this conversation alive when the mainstream outlets won't have it. I'll see you in the next one.